Hi, I'm Rick Dior, and welcome to my calf head show and tell. So today I'm going to show you a lot of the different calf heads that I use and that I have. I've gotten a lot of questions on this since I've started posting some more jazz drum set videos where I have calf on the drums. So hopefully this will help answer some of these questions. So one of the main questions was, what kind of heads are they? The heads on those drums right now are these type of heads, earth tone. So we're in the summer here in North Carolina, and it's humid. And yes, I do have air conditioning and all that, but no matter how much air conditioning you have, there's going to be more humidity in the air than, say, if you're in the middle of January or February. So I try to keep the humidity in the studio around 50%. Maybe sometimes it gets up to 60, but no more than that. To do any more than that, you have to run a dehumidifier and air conditioning constantly, and I really don't want to do that for energy concerns, environmental and financial. So that's where I keep my humidity relatively anywhere from 50 to 60%. And even if that's the case, the heads are going to move no matter what. That's the way calf heads are. They're all over the place. So from day to day, you got to tune your drums every day. If you're not used to doing that, don't use calf heads because you're going to be very, very frustrated. Now, there's also kangaroo heads and goat skin heads, lots of different types of heads. Steve Weiss Music sells both of those. You can investigate those. I have recently, and I like them, but I don't like them any better than the calf heads that I have. It's a little different tone. My friend who plays with the Vienna Symphony sent me, Orwin Falk sent me a goat skin head, which was beautiful. It's a concert head, and I will be doing a video on that. And that's a really, really nice head, but I did put it on one of my toms. It didn't work great on like the floor tom, but it sounds glorious on a classical snare drum. So like I said, I'll do a separate video on that. So we're just going to talk about calf today, and so don't send me comments and emails asking me if I've tried other heads, because I have, and they're also great, but again, to my ear and feel, not any worse or better than calfskin, and they are more expensive. So if you can find some old calfskin heads, those are really, really good. Calfskin heads will last forever if you take care of them. They do not wear out. What will happen is they will break. I showed one in a recent video. I'll show you this again. This one tore out. It was a snare resonant head, so where the snares go, and very, very thin. As a comparison, this is a Evans Hazy 200. It's like cellophane, okay? And it's very, very difficult to find calf heads that thin. This was one of them, so I was kind of upset when I came in one day to the studio, and I had not loosened it because I forgot, and this was in the winter, and it just broke. And they'll do that. Now, all is not lost, because I will cut this out and use it for either a tambourine head. It's a little thin for that, or maybe a tom head on a 10-inch drum. So I'll probably retuck that at some point. Now, this is a wood rim, okay, the mounting. And I've talked about this before in my other calf head video, and I'll put a link to that in the description. But when you tuck these, you have to make sure that rim is straight and not warped. Otherwise, it won't sit on the drum. Now, you can retrain them by putting them on a drum and just really clamping it down. In other words, tightening that drum and then heating it up with like a blow dryer. Okay, don't put it in the oven. Just you could leave it in the sun. That's another good thing. Like sometimes I'll leave it out on my deck. I'll set a timer so I don't forget about it, and then I'll go out there, and then that will straighten out that wood rim somewhat, but not perfectly. Okay, so once that rim is warped, it's never going to be the same. These are all pretty straight, as you can see, this one. So I'll reuse this. My favorite mounting system for calf heads is metal. Okay, so I've said this before. This is an old Lang, Arnie Lang. I got this from him. Tom head, and this is stamped in metal. The best ones are the Lafima heads, and you can get these from Europe, but they are very expensive. And these, I've never had one of these come loose, and they're also pretty tight to begin with, so they won't stretch out. Excuse me. Now, one thing that I've said, calf heads will go bad, and this one has split here. This is a really, really old one of the oldest ones I have, from the 1930s. And I could still use it, but it does have a little tiny split there. And what happens over time is that when you put it on the drum, it will pull out. In other words, as you tighten it and loosen it, tighten it and loosen it over many, many years, in this case, 90 years or so, the head will become unusable because you can only tighten down your lugs on your snare drum so much. In that case, you need to retuck it. So you wet it in the bathtub, and then you take off the head and retuck it. And that's what I'm going to do with this one. I'm going to make this into a smaller head. I believe this is a 12-inch head. I'll make this into a 10 or a tambourine head, like I said. Okay, so that's the problem with the calf heads. If you don't take care of them, that's how they wear out. They don't wear out like a regular plastic head. In other words, if you play brushes on them, that response will always be the same. Whereas a coated head wears out. But these will pull out, or they'll stretch to where you can't use them. But again, you can cut them out and retuck them. So we'll show you some heads today. This is a Timbale head. This is an old, from a set of Timbalitos, the small LP Timbales. And this is actually a really nice head. Got a lot of use. Took it off, though, and put some plastic heads on my Timbales. And this is kind of a weird size. These things weren't sized right. So sometimes a lot of the old drums, especially the premier drums, had weird sizes, like 11-inch heads, or not even quite 14, or the bass drums and all. In that case, you can have a rim. In other words, you can make a head where you take this wood rim, you cut it, you glue it. It's a pain in the neck, and then you can make a head for a drum. Now, Remo still makes some heads for those drums in odd sizes. This is another old head here. Now, this is one of the first metal rims that I've ever seen. And this head is very, very old. So you see how thin that is compared to this. This is wood. All right. So they did do it back in the day. Not often, though. And this is a Slingerland Radio King head. All right, we'll show you a few more of those in a minute. And on and on. Now, some are real thin like this. That's definitely not a good drum set head. You'll go right through that. But good for a 13-inch, which is what that is, snare drum, classical drum. Okay, that's what I use it for. Now, this is a Chagrel head. I think that's how you say it. It's German. I bought this. It's very, very heavy. The heaviest one I have. This hoop must be made out of some sort of lead, because this thing weighs about 3 or 4 pounds. All right? It's a nice head. Real thin, though. And here's a rarity, a Leedy and Ludwig head that came off an old Leedy and Ludwig drum set that I have. Okay, so again, this is show and tell, so we'll show you. And another, this is a good example of a bent rim. This is what happens when they get warped. So this is one that's going to the repair shop. And you see how flimsy that is? So this one needs a lot of maintenance. I will retuck this on a new rim. Okay? So those are the basics. And we did already talk about the real thin snare side heads. That's one of them. Thinnest one I own. And really hard to come by. So be real careful with those. When you break those, it's kind of heartbreaking because they're so hard to find, the real thin ones. Now, these earth tone heads are fine. They're not great, but they do sound good. And they're tough, too. They're kind of bleached, where you see that process there. Whereas if you take we'll find a Lafima head, you see the difference there, okay? Here's a real neat one. This actually looks like a cow. All right? Looks like a coffee spill, but it's not. That's just the way the head is. All right, but these are all kind of uniform white, and they're fine. To me, they might not ring as much as the older heads, but they're tougher. So for the drum set, they're a good choice, the earth tone heads. Now, what you want to do is you want to keep your heads in plastic when you're not using them like this. So these are just several Lafima heads. This one I need to put in plastic. But see, I keep them like that, all right? These are all 14s for my classical drums. So I definitely recommend doing that. It also helps with the humidity issue. And you seal them. You can buy a little sealer they use for kitchen bags and just, it heats it up and melts it. Seal them. It really helps with the humidity. All right, so let's show you some big ones now. Oh, before we do that, this is a Conga head. There's a lot of curiosity with these. This is like rawhide. You could make shoes out of this stuff. So the Conga heads are much thicker. You would not want to use this kind of calf on a Conga head. It just would have no sound. It'd be too ringy. A djembe head, maybe. Okay, that's thinner. But the Conga heads are very, very thick. About 10 times as thick as these. And you see, this thing's tough. You can play with sticks, obviously your hands. And, they will break. So make sure you loosen that Conga up, especially in the winter. Either the shell will crack or these will break. These can get so tight that it'll crack the shell. And that happens. So make sure you always do that. So these are the old Radio King heads, bass drum heads. I don't know who NW was, but I bought these used. And these are 22s. I use this on a set of 22, both of them on a 22-inch bass drum. That's the front, the beater head. And this is what I call the back, okay? No hole or anything. I don't put holes in these. All right, but this is a set of calf heads that came on a Radio King drum set. Going to be expensive if you're going to buy these. They do sound great, especially if you're playing jazz with a bigger bass drum. I use these on my big band kit when I do a big band gig. And what I'll do here is I took it off today so you could see, but you see how it wears out. I'll put a pad on here of moleskin and maybe even something else so I don't go through it. They're very thin, see? But that's part of the sound. Your bass drum, it's got this beautiful, almost a classical Grand Casa sound, which is a concert bass drum. It's just a doom, doom sound. It's really, really nice. You can also get punch out of it too, though, which is great. You can't get that out of a plastic head. I do use a harder lamb's wool beater that's a little worn down. Okay, I kind of give it a trim there, and that's what I use on this bass drum when I play on these heads. Finally, this is something I tucked recently. I got some calfskin from an old timpani head, and I'm going to put these on my concert bass drum. I have a Pearl 34-inch bass drum, and so I tucked these in a kid's swimming pool, and they came out great. I'd never tucked a head this big before. I tucked maybe a couple 26 and 29 or 28-inch timpani heads, but this is a big one. This is a 34, so I was a little bit nervous because the material was so expensive, but it did come out really good. And you see how it's a little bit wrinkled here, but that's to be expected. Okay, and it's a big process. It's going to be about 6 hours. Most of it me being stupid. But once I got it right, it worked really good. And I used clamps, okay, to do it. I wish I could have done a videotape of it, but I just didn't think about it. And I was outside, it was hot and all that. So I should have done that, so I apologize. But I got a bunch of little clamps. I got them at Harbor Freight. They're super cheap. And once I got it on there, I put a little glue on there. Okay, a little woodworker's glue works great. And then I clamped it all the way around with about 30 clamps. And it did come out really good. And I took these off to show you, so I don't have to bring the bass drum down. This X marks the front head. And once I played it, it was such an improvement over the fiber skin heads I used on there. It's just hard to explain how much better it was. Just a beautiful, deep, warm kind of sound. All right, and then here's the other one for the other side. Now the Symphony that I play with has used calf heads on their bass drum for over 50 years now. I haven't been there that long. I've only been there 31 or 32 years, but they've been on there. They've never broken, and that I know of. And so if you take care of them, they'll last forever, unlike a plastic head, which will wear out. This is the only spot that I kind of wasn't great. It just ended up a little uneven because the hoop was a little warped, but hopefully you can see that. Okay, so as I do this every time, I get a little bit better at it. Now my teacher, Fred Hinger, was just incredible at this stuff. He's the one who taught me how to do it. He would have these things in his basement in Leonia, New Jersey, and he had like a thing where he did it. He had rolls of these calf heads down there, and I really wanted to learn how to do it, and he showed me how to do it. I used to go to his house for lessons sometimes, and after every lesson, I made sure I was the last one, if he had any others there. And this is when he was playing with the Met, so then he would drive me back into the city, which was awesome, on his way to his gig. So, yeah, he would show me how to do this over time, and I tried a few times and it was bad. And then eventually, over many years, I got much, much better. But again, I hadn't ever tried to do stuff this big. So that's my next project. I'm going to try to start doing some timpani heads. So I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you soon.